silence of a Mediterranean Saturday morning in Tel Aviv was not broken by the usual sound of crashing waves or city traffic, but by a mechanical wail that has become the terrifying heartbeat of the Middle East. It was February 28th, 2026, a date that will be etched into the archives of history as the moment the old world order finally fractured beyond repair. For decades, the conflict between Israel and Iran was a shadow war, fought in the digital ether, through whispered assassinations in the alleys of Tehran, and by proxy forces in the hills of Lebanon. But on this morning, the shadows vanished, replaced by the blinding light of precision explosives. As sirens blared from the Galilee to the Negev, the skies over Israel erupted in a desperate ballet of interceptors and incoming fire. Millions of citizens scrambled for bunkers, their lives suspended in a state of primitive fear. But while the world watched the Iron Dome struggle against a saturation of drones, the real story was unfolding thousands of miles to the east, where a single, sophisticated weapon had just changed the rules of engagement forever. This was the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated strike of such audacity that it caught the most paranoid regime on Earth completely off guard. At exactly 8:10 in the morning, local Tehran time, the first munitions impacted their targets. Israeli officials would later confirm that they had deployed the Blue Sparrow, an advanced air-launched ballistic missile designed to pierce the most hardened defenses. This was the secret missile that changed everything. Unlike conventional weapons, it traveled to the very edge of space before plunging back to Earth at hypersonic speeds, making interception nearly impossible. Its target was not a military base or a nuclear silo, but the political nerve center of the Islamic Republic. Inside a guarded compound on Pasteur Street, the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was meeting with his top military council. They believed they were safe, shielded by Russian-made air defense systems and the sanctity of the morning hour during the holy month of Ramadan. They were wrong. The strike was so surgical and so sudden that it lasted less than 50 seconds. In that brief window of time, the building was reduced to a pile of smoldering concrete and twisted rebar. Within hours, intelligence reports began to leak, suggesting a staggering reality. The supreme leader was dead. The man who had ruled Iran with an iron fist for 36 years, the architect of the axis of resistance, was gone in a single heartbeat. Alongside him, 40 senior commanders, including the head of the Revolutionary Guard and the defense minister, were reportedly eliminated. It was a decapitation strike unlike anything the modern world had ever witnessed. As satellite imagery showed black smoke billowing over the Iranian capital, the realization set in that there was no going back. The United States and Israel had not just launched a raid, they had initiated a war of annihilation aimed at total regime change. But as the leadership in Tehran fell into chaos, the Iranian military machine, built for this exact nightmare, began its automatic response. From hidden silos carved into the mountains, hundreds of ballistic missiles began their ascent, aimed at the heart of Tel Aviv. The city was about to go dark, and the Middle East was spiraling into a firestorm that no one could control. As the smoke cleared from the ruins of the Pasteur Street compound, the world grappled with the sheer scale of the intelligence breach that allowed such a strike. For years, Israeli intelligence had deeply penetrated the Iranian regime. They had hacked Tehran's traffic cameras, including the one pointing directly at the parking space used by Khamenei's bodyguards. Through a pattern of life analysis, they knew his routine better than his own family. The decision to strike in broad daylight was a calculated gamble, exploiting a moment when the leadership felt most secure. But while the head of the octopus was severed, the tentacles were already acting with lethal independence. Iran had long prepared for this scenario through its Mosaic defense system, a decentralized doctrine that divided the country into 31 autonomous units. These units were now in a weapons-free mode, launching missiles without needing orders from a central command that no longer existed. In Tel Aviv, the results were immediate and devastating. The city, often called the bubble for its perceived safety, was suddenly on the front line of an all-out war. Iran unleashed what military analysts call a drizzle strategy. Instead of one massive wave that could be intercepted, they fired a steady, relentless stream of projectiles designed to saturate and exhaust Israel's expensive air defense batteries. Interceptors like the Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow 3 were forced to engage targets costing a fraction of their own production price. Reports began to emerge of cluster munitions being used, ejecting dozens of submunitions over a wide area to maximize damage to civilian infrastructure. One ballistic missile reportedly struck a residential building in Tel Aviv, while others landed in open areas near the city's outskirts. The psychological toll was mounting. For the first time in generations, the lights in Tel Aviv began to flicker and fail as the energy grid groaned under the impact of the strikes. Thousands of residents remained in bomb shelters for days, listening to the continuous thunder of interceptions overhead. The Ben Gurion Airport, the gateway to the nation, was forced to close its runways. But the conflict was no longer contained to the Levant. In a desperate bid to force an international ceasefire, Iran began lashing out at any nation hosting American military assets. Missiles and drones rained down on the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain. In Dubai, a drone strike ignited a massive fire at the entrance of a luxury hotel on the Palm Jumeirah, sending a clear message to the world's elite that no corner of the Middle East was safe from the fallout of Donald Trump's epic fury. The economic consequences were global and instantaneous. As reports of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz spread, oil prices surged by more than 20% in a single day. Analysts warned that if the world's most critical energy choke point remained closed, crude could skyrocket to $150 per barrel. The global supply chain, already fragile, faced a logistical black hole. Major shipping companies like Maersk suspended all traffic through the region, fearing their vessels would be set on fire or seized by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. In Washington, the political fallout was just beginning. While President Trump boasted of an obliterated regime, his own intelligence community quietly admitted that the war of attrition had only just begun. The secret missile had killed a leader, but it had also ignited a regional conflagration that threatened to drag the entire world into the abyss. While the world watched the flickering lights of Tel Aviv, the skies over Tehran had transformed into a vision of the apocalypse. The precision strikes of Operation Epic Fury had moved beyond military bunkers to dismantle the very lifeblood of the Iranian nation. As United States and Israeli warplanes hammered oil refineries and storage facilities, a grotesque meteorological phenomenon took hold: black rain. The mixture of soot from burning fuel depots and heavy rainfall created a toxic downpour that coated the streets of the capital in a slick, dark film. In the city's sewage systems, spilled oil ignited, creating flowing rivers of fire that mirrored the hellish descriptions of ancient prophecy. The Shan oil depot, which supplied more than 50% of the city's energy, was reduced to a smoldering crater, plunging 17 million people into a freezing, smoke-filled darkness. The targeting strategy was as cruel as it was effective. Not content with striking energy grids, the coalition turned its sights on freshwater desalination plants. On Keshem Island, a vital facility was destroyed, leaving 30 villages without potable water and hardening the resolve of a population that the Trump administration hoped would rise in revolution. Instead of a collapse into pro-Western democratic fervor, the Iranian street began to entrench. Even those who had spent January protesting the clerical regime found themselves rallying behind the flag as their children suffered from thirst and the fallout of high-tech bombardment. It was a massive miscalculation of the human spirit. President Trump's public demand for unconditional surrender only served to bridge the divide between the people and the remnants of the military leadership. In the air, the technological abyss between the combatants was displayed with ruthless clarity. In a historic engagement 60 miles southwest of Bushehr, 6 Iranian Phantoms attempted to ambush a single American F-35 Lightning II. The Phantoms, museum pieces from the 1960s kept airborne through decades of reverse engineering and cannibalized parts, never stood a chance. The F-35 pilot, operating with spherical situational awareness and a radar cross-section the size of a marble, picked off the Iranian jets one by one without ever being detected. In less than 8 minutes, 1/3 of Iran's operational fighter fleet was erased from the sky. It was a demonstration of ghost killer capability that silenced any debate about the carrier group's air dominance. Yet, as the United States military celebrated its tactical supremacy, a new and more dangerous variable entered the equation. Intelligence reports confirmed that Russia had activated its space-based surveillance apparatus to assist Tehran. Moscow was now providing real-time targeting data on American naval vessels and military bases, allowing Iranian drones to find gaps in the defense shield. This invisible hand from the north was blamed for a devastating drone strike on a makeshift facility in Kuwait, which claimed the lives of 6 American service members. Simultaneously, the Iranian Assembly of Experts moved with defiant speed to fill the leadership vacuum, naming Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the slain leader, as the new supreme leader. The selection was a clear signal to Washington. The regime would not bend. Mojtaba, a hardliner even more radical than his father, took power in the middle of a shooting war, effectively ending any hope for a quick diplomatic exit. The Middle East was no longer just a battlefield. It had become the epicenter of a global confrontation. The strategic commitment of the United States reached a tipping point as the Pentagon surged a third nuclear supercarrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, across the Atlantic to join the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford. This triple carrier punch represented the largest concentration of American naval power in a single conflict since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. By concentrating more than a quarter of the entire carrier fleet in one theater, Washington signaled it was prepared for a sustained campaign, not a limited raid. However, this massive display of steel hid a growing logistical nightmare. In just the first 4 days of the operation, the U.S. military campaign cost nearly $11 billion, with $5.7 billion alone spent on missile interceptors. The Pentagon was burning through advanced munitions at an unsustainable rate, forcing President Trump to propose a defense budget expansion to $1.5 trillion and order contractors to quadruple the production of exquisite weaponry. The math of modern warfare was proving brutal. Shooting down a $20,000 Iranian drone with a $2 million Patriot missile was an economic war of attrition the defenders were losing. In the waters of the Gulf, an information war raged over the fate of the USS Abraham Lincoln. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard claimed the carrier had been hit first by ballistic missiles and later by naval drones. While American Central Command issued blunt denials, analysts noted a telling change in posture. The Lincoln and its escorts had moved from a position 340 kilometers off the Iranian coast to more than 1,000 kilometers away. This distance significantly altered sortie rates and loiter times for strike aircraft, suggesting that the carrier group had adjusted its calculation of risk in the face of Iranian saturation tactics. Even as U.S. officials insisted that 93% of Iranian projectiles were being intercepted, enough were slipping through to cause chaos. In Dubai, falling drone debris struck the Marina district, killing 2 Pakistani nationals and shattering the illusion of safety in the region's premier commerce hub. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's daily oil supply passes, was now functionally closed, with commercial traffic dropping by 90%. The humanitarian and political costs were mounting faster than the military gains. UNICEF confirmed that at least 181 children had been killed inside Iran during the first 8 days of bombing, including the horrific massacre at a girls' school in Manab. In the United States, public support for the war was collapsing. A majority of 51% of Americans disapproved of the military action, and the president's approval rating cratered to a new low of 27%. Major protests erupted in New York City, Washington, and Los Angeles, where the Iranian diaspora expressed a painful fragmentation of emotions, elation at the potential end of the regime, mixed with deep sorrow for the civilians dying under American bombs. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill were equally horrified, claiming that the administration had no coherent strategy for the day after and had bypassed constitutional requirements to declare war. While Trump's allies like Lindsey Graham spoke of marching through the world and blowing the hell out of these people, the reality on the ground resembled a regional configuration that no one truly controlled. The world's sole superpower was trapped in a cycle of escalation, where every tactical victory seemed to pull it deeper into a global conflict. The geopolitical map of the Middle East began to buckle as the conflict spread to every major regional power. Saudi Arabia, the silent giant, was pulled into the fire when the Aramco oil refinery in Ras Tanura was shut down after a wave of drone strikes. While Tehran officially denied responsibility, rumors of a false flag operation by Israel to drag the kingdom into the war began to circulate. The fog of war was so thick that even Riyadh's diplomatic quarter became a battlefield, with explosions from Iranian drone strikes rocking the United States embassy. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who had reportedly spent the previous month urging Donald Trump to strike Iran, now found his own capital under a hail of missiles. The regional price of this epic fury was no longer just economic, it was existential. Inside the fractured halls of the Iranian regime, the selection of a new leader was proving to be a catalyst for internal chaos. While Mojtaba Khamenei was named the successor, rumors of a civil war between hardline Revolutionary Guard units and moderate remnants of the government began to leak out. The president of Iran made a shocking public apology to his neighbors for the strikes, only for the military to immediately backtrack and launch fresh attacks on Dubai. This fragmentation suggested that the regime had lost control of its own forces. Even more alarming for Tehran was the betrayal from within its own borders, as Iranian citizens began sharing global positioning system coordinates of secret Revolutionary Guard hideouts with the United States and Israeli militaries. The paranoia reached a fever pitch, with unconfirmed reports that Quds Force commander Esmail Khani had been arrested or even executed by his own guards on suspicion of being a Mossad mole who leaked the supreme leader's location. The technological shield protecting Israel and its allies was also showing unprecedented cracks. In a surgical strike, Iran demonstrated the ability to blind its enemies by destroying the $500 million primary radar sensor of a United States terminal high-altitude area defense system at the Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. This loss of tactical eyes meant that subsequent salvos of ballistic missiles were harder to track, and for the first time, projectiles penetrated the most defended airspace in the world to impact central Tel Aviv. The math was turning against the West. Iran's drizzle strategy was designed to force the expenditure of millions of dollars in interceptors for every cheap drone or outdated missile launched. Even as the United States military carried out 900 strikes in 12 hours, they were discovering that they were losing more in munitions value than Iran was losing in hardware. As the battlefield widened, the leaders themselves became ghosts. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was estimated to spend 90% of his time on a plane, ruling from the sky because the ground had become a kill zone for any stationary target. In Washington, the Trump administration's claim that there was an unlimited supply of munitions was being challenged by emergency meetings with defense contractors to quadruple production. The war was no longer a quick Venezuelan-style decapitation. It was transforming into a multi-theater conflict involving Russia and potentially China, who were now providing intelligence to help Iran locate American assets. Protests erupted across Iraq and Pakistan, with mobs attempting to storm American embassies as the Shia populations reacted to the strikes on their spiritual leadership. The Middle East that the world knew was disappearing, replaced by a logistics-driven nightmare that threatened to bankrupt the superpower before the first boots ever hit the ground. As the conflict grinds into its second week, the tactical brilliance of the first strikes has given way to a grueling war of attrition that is rapidly draining the resources of the world's most powerful military coalition. While Israeli officials claim near-complete air superiority, the reality in the skies above Tel Aviv remains a frantic struggle for survival as Iran activates its most dangerous arsenal, which it had kept under wraps during the opening days of the assault. The introduction of the Fatah hypersonic flagship missile, capable of reaching speeds of Mach 15, has fundamentally compromised the defensive shields of Israel and its allies. These missiles, combined with the Khorramshahr 4 advanced solid-fuel, medium-range ballistic missiles, utilize decoy swarms to overwhelm and confuse tracking systems like the Patriot, Terminal High-Altitude Area Defense, and Arrow 3. Military analysts warn that the interceptor math is becoming unsustainable. While Iran fires inexpensive decoys and mass-produced drones, the United States and its partners are burning through billion-dollar missile systems at a rate that has left the United Arab Emirates with only a week's worth of interceptors and Qatar with just 4 days. President Trump's emergency meeting with top defense contractors to quadruple production underscores a terrifying reality. The United States is running low on the precision munitions required to sustain a high-intensity war across multiple theaters. The administration's gamble that Iran would surrender quickly like Venezuela has failed because Iran is not Venezuela. It is a naturally fortified nation of over 90 million people, with a decentralized mosaic command structure designed to survive the very decapitation strikes it just endured. The selection of Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader has only hardened the regime's resolve, as he now leads a unified front of true believers in the Revolutionary Guard, who view the conflict as a holy war of revenge for his father's martyrdom. This has effectively closed the window for a diplomatic exit, as the new Ayatollah rejects even the thought of surrender to what he calls the shameless Americans. Meanwhile, the economic fallout is beginning to destabilize the global order. With the Strait of Hormuz 90% closed and traffic through the Suez Canal effectively halted, the world is facing an energy supply shock that could push oil prices toward $150 per barrel, triggering a chain reaction of factory shutdowns and global inflation. The American public, already weary of foreign wars of choice, is witnessing the first 6 of many expected casualties returning home while their own domestic priorities are sidelined for a $50 billion military supplemental. Even as Lindsey Graham promises a campaign to force Iran to its knees, history bears witness that air campaigns alone never create a clean victory. Instead, they often lead to a dangerous escalation matrix and the creation of a failed state. The final question that now haunts every war room from Washington to Jerusalem is what peace actually looks like in a region where every red line has been erased. The degraded leadership in Tehran is proving surprisingly resilient. And as the black rain continues to fall on a radicalized population, the United States may find that instead of toppling a regime, it has instead ignited a forever war that will bleed its treasury and its patience for a generation. Tel Aviv may have gone dark for now, but the secret missile that changed the Middle East has ensured that no one will see a clear path to victory in the smoldering ruins of this historic miscalculation. The world is no longer waiting for the war to end. It is struggling to survive the new, more dangerous chapter that has just begun.